Welcome to Soundscape Books. You're listening to an exclusive audiobook recording. Like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy.
The Music Box Haunting. Chapter 1. The First Whisper. The university archives, cool air, a familiar chill, settled on Clara. Dust motes danced in anemic light from a high arched window, illuminating stacks of forgotten lives. Her polished dark wood desk held only essentials: a legal pad, a fine-point pen, a laptop open to a blank document. No coffee cup, no discarded wrappers. Clara welcomed such order, a contrast to the past's chaos she now explored. Her current excavation focused on a largely overlooked segment of local institutional history. She had requested files from St. Augustine's orphanage, shuttered abruptly in the late 1950s. The cart beside her, groaning under bound ledgers and faded reports, promised a methodical unearthing. Her long, precise fingers traced the embossed lettering on the first volume. St. Augustine's Annual Report, 1954. She opened it. The dry scent of old paper rose. The initial sweep was always the same. Names, dates, budgets, hours bled into one another. No clear pattern emerged, only an absence. Official records, particularly pertaining to the children, were sparse. Admissions, yes. Departures, sometimes with a terse adopted or transferred. But the human minutiae, the details, felt conspicuously absent, not merely incomplete, but omitted. A curious void in a world usually suffocated by bureaucracy. Contrasting this void was the glowing praise for the orphanage's caretaker, Jasper Croft. Every report, every official communication, painted him as a saint. A man of unimpeachable character, a pillar of the community, devoted to the welfare of every precious soul under his charge. The praise felt saccharine, almost performative, clashing with the paper-thin documentation of the children he supposedly cherished. Clara made a small, neat note: Croft, glowing reports versus sparse child data. The pen clicked softly. Late afternoon, sifting a box of ancillary materials, local newspaper clippings, community letters, forgotten pamphlets. Her fingers brushed a folded, brittle sheet. Not an official document, but a personal observation clipped from an obscure weekly column. The print was faint, the edges yellowed and rough. It detailed a small, innocuous local fundraiser for St. Augustine's. But tucked into the margin, scrawled in a shaky hand, was a brief, whispered addition. Another one gone. And the music box still plays. Always those bad dreams. Clara paused, her gaze fixed on the anomaly. A music box and bad dreams. The words carried an odd weight, disconnected from the mundane account of cake stalls and raffle tickets. She clipped the fragment to her notes, a tiny, unsettling burr in the otherwise smooth fabric of her academic pursuit. That night, her apartment's quiet order offered no sanctuary. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the precise lines of shadow and light, failing to calm her racing mind. The day's research replayed, missing records, Croft's excessive praise, the cryptic music box phrase. Usually, new projects energized her, fueling a logical hunger. Tonight, an unfamiliar anxiety brewed. Her jaw ached, her limbs felt heavy, yet restless. She shifted, punching her pillow, but sleep remained an elusive, mocking phantom. It wasn't the academic challenge keeping her awake, it was a vague, unsettling unease she couldn't categorize, an internal tremor without a discernible source. Her logical mind searched for explanation: late-day caffeine, the residual hum of the archives, sheer volume of material. But the feeling persisted, an alien thrum beneath her ribs. It was merely the first whisper, one that promised to steal many more nights, demanding a truth she couldn't yet articulate, but knew, with a chilling certainty, lay buried deep. Chapter 2. The Obsessive Melody. Old paper and dust clung to Clara like a second skin. Her study, once organized and minimal, now resembled a battlefield of knowledge. Yellowed periodicals, microfiche and digital files glowed on a second monitor, all focused on St. Augustine's. Weeks blurred into relentless pursuit. Croft's file remained maddeningly clean, spotless reports, glowing commendations from local officials, even a framed photo of him, smiling, surrounded by children. The image felt staged, too perfect. A constructed alibi. She leaned closer, scanning a digitized 1957 church bulletin. It briefly mentioned the orphanage's annual fair, followed by a prayer for the spiritual well-being of all our dear children. General, vacuous, nothing concrete. Clara knew the difference between a historical gap and a deliberate omission. These records, missing children, excessive praise, weren't gaps. They were excavations. Someone had buried something. She cross-referenced names, dates, minor incidents. Every path led to a cul-de-sac. Every independent account she hoped for didn't exist. Her jaw ached with suppressed frustration. Sleep had become a stranger. Herbal tea, lukewarm baths, even mind-numbing history podcasts. Nothing worked. Her bed, a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. She punched the pillow. 3:17. Red digits on the alarm clock mocked her. Her mind raced, not with academic fervor, but with a chaotic, untethered energy, a hum beneath her thoughts. Then it began. A subtle, high-pitched plink-plonk, plink-plonk. A simple, innocent, repetitive 5-note refrain. A child's tune. It materialized in the room's stillness, echoing not in the air, but behind her temples. She pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes. An earworm, she told herself. An overtired brain's trick. She hummed a complex Baroque piece. The music box tune simply wove around it, relentless, unwavering. Days later, at her desk, in muted afternoon light, the melody intensified. A low, persistent thrum joined the plink-plonk. Then, the cold. Not an open window's chill, but a sudden, pervasive invasion. It sank into her bones, bringing a faint, unmistakable odor. Stale disinfectant, ammonia, and something else. A metallic tang, like old blood. She gasped. Her vision blurred at the edges, desk papers swaying. No images, just cold, smell, the feeling of a vast, echoing space. Institutional. Stark. The sensation lasted seconds, leaving her breathless, heart hammering against her ribs. She gripped the desk edge, knuckles white. Not stress. Not a trick of light. She returned to the cryptic note. Music box and bad dreams. The words suddenly resonated with unnerving clarity. The melody. The cold. The nameless fear. She sifted through the fragmented mentions again. Fingers trembling as she turned pages. A fleeting line in a parish ledger, squeezed between baptisms and burials. Sarah. Removed. No last name. No explanation. An equally vague entry in a charity's annual report, buried within expenses. Funds allocated for the immediate care of a child, Sarah, whose health declined rapidly. No more. Nothing else. Just Sarah. A shadow. A whisper. Rational explanations failed. Exhaustion, anxiety, historical empathy, all felt inadequate, hollow. The melody played on, louder, insistent. Her own mind, the fortress of logic she'd built, was no longer safe. What if these weren't her internal struggles? What if they were echoes, reverberations from the very stories she sought? The missing children. Their silence. Desperate, unheard voices. Sarah. Clara looked at the corkboard map. A faded circle marked the abandoned orphanage. Its skeletal outline, visible in old aerial photographs, loomed. A sudden cold dread mingled with burning urgency, sweeping away academic detachment. Her heart quickened. The melody pulsed, a drumbeat in her skull. It wasn't a hypothesis. It was a plea. They needed to be heard. And she, Clara, historian of forgotten truths, would be their instrument. The biting wind already seemed to call from St. Augustine's, a silent summons she could no longer ignore. Chapter 3. Echoes in the walls. The wind, sharp with the tang of late autumn and decay, whipped Clara's hair. St. Augustine's loomed against the bruised sky, a skeletal edifice of broken promises. Jagged glass teeth winked from vacant window frames. Peeling paint clung to the brickwork like withered skin. The roof sagged, a testament to decades of neglect. A rusted iron gate hung ajar, groaning on its one remaining hinge. Each gust carried fine dust, a particulate memory stubbornly present. She pushed through the gate. Metal shrieked. A shiver colder than the wind traced her spine. Her boots crunched on scattered debris. Fallen leaves, brick shards. A plastic toy faded to a ghost of its former color. The air hung heavy, thick with damp earth and a metallic old scent, like forgotten blood. Inside, a vast silence swallowed her breath. Dust motes danced in sparse sunlight, slicing through grime-streaked windows, illuminating a forgotten playground of childhood nightmares. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight. The air grew colder, infused with stale disinfectant, and the unsettling scent from her apartment, now a visceral assault. Then, the music. A whisper, a distant, tinkling lullaby. Then it swelled in her skull, a frantic saccharine melody beating against her eardrums like a trapped bird. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Each note needled, piercing her composure. Her hands flew to her temples, pressing, as if to push back the relentless childish jingle. The walls seemed to breathe with it, a collective hum of forgotten grief. The cold bit, a chill settling deep in her bones. A flash, not a thought, but a vivid experience. Cold concrete against her cheek. The faint, sweet smell of a cheap biscuit. The dull, persistent ache of hunger. A shadow falling across her small, curled form. The music box played on, louder, insistent. Profound, elemental fear surged through her. A child's terror. She stumbled back, hit a crumbling wall, gasping for air suddenly too thin, too laden with sorrow. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the onslaught. Dust taste in her mouth, the institutional smell overwhelming, sickening. This isn't real. But the fear, the sadness were. A wave of profound abandonment, not her own, consumed her utterly. She opened her eyes. A flicker caught her periphery, a small, indistinct shape at the corridor's end. Gone before her gaze could settle. A child-sized figure, thin and translucent, vanishing into the gloom. Sarah. The name whispered, a quiet conviction superseding all logic. An invisible cord tugged, drawing her deeper into the building. Past the gaping maw of the kitchen, its tiled floor cracked and stained. Past the dormitory, where rusted bed frames stood like silent sentinels. The pull intensified, leading her to a small, enclosed room off the main hall, a storage closet or punishment room. Its door hung ajar, half-rotten. Inside, light almost entirely vanished. Only a sliver of grey distinguished floor from ceiling. A powerful intuition, foreign yet absolute, compelled her to the far corner. Her fingers scraped rough plaster, exploring a loose baseboard section. It gave with a faint creak. Behind it, nestled in dust and cobwebs, a small, crudely carved wooden horse rested. Its paint flaked away, leaving only a ghost of white coat and a single chipped black eye. Its tiny legs were broken, its mane a splintered mess. Too small for an adult's hand, perfectly sized for a child's grasp. A child forgotten, as Clara stared at the wooden horse, stark, tangible proof amidst the phantoms. The music box melody still throbbed, but terror now mixed with a cold, quiet rage. Jasper Croft. The name formed a silent curse. She left St. Augustine's as the last daylight bled from the sky. The desolate building loomed behind her, a dark silhouette against the encroaching night. Her legs trembled, head pounded, a persistent chill embedded in her bones. But the fear that had gripped her now mingled with an unwavering, burning resolve. The logical historian was gone, replaced by a relentless, methodical hunter. She had seen, felt, and now knew. The voices of St. Augustine's, of Sarah, were not just echoes, they were a roar demanding justice. Clara, their instrument, would answer. There was only one name on her lips, one target in her mind: Jasper Croft. Chapter 4. The Man Behind the Mask. The fluorescent hum of the library amplified the frantic thrumming behind Clara's eyes. Days blurred into a single, agitated chase. Her St. Augustine's files vanished from her table, replaced by a chaotic sprawl of microfiches, old city directories, and fragile newspaper clippings, all bearing a single name: Jasper Croft. His name, once a saccharine footnote, now tasted of ash. She no longer sought missing children, she hunted him. The official records were a brick wall. Croft, lauded as a paragon of compassion, appeared a ghostly figure, almost too perfect. He lacked true history, enduring roots. An obituary lauded his quiet life, selfless dedication, but named no family, no spouse. A curious blankness. Digging unearthed a brief stint at a similar institution decades prior, a boys' home upstate. The transfer reason was vague: administrative restructuring. No scandal, no blemish. Just a quiet void where a past should have been. Clara traced old council meeting minutes, local society pages. Somewhere, a brittle, yellowed article detailed a complaint from a former employee, dismissed as disgruntled ramblings. Another, a neighbor's fleeting quote, noted Croft's unusual methods with a difficult child. A child who, the article concluded, fell ill and was sent elsewhere. Dismissed. Forgotten. But Clara heard not ramblings, not gossip. They were the faint, cold echoes of truth. Each unearthed silence screamed. The music box melody was no longer intermittent. Now, it was a constant, insidious companion. A tinny, childlike lament looping through her skull day and night. Sleep was a concept, not a reality. When she did drift, darkness became a canvas for St. Augustine's. Peeling paint, echoing halls, the scent of antiseptic and old blood. Sarah, a fleeting shadow, hovered at the periphery of these waking nightmares, her small, pale face, a silent accusation. The lines between real and felt dissolved into a disorienting, terrifying haze. She tried to type research notes, but words swam, keyboard keys growing large then shrinking, her own hands alien instruments. A book she reached for on a high shelf receded, then lurched forward, making her stumble. Her throat was raw from an unquenchable thirst. Clara! The voice startled her, pulling her from a tableau of flickering shadows and the ceaseless melody. Professor Albright stood beside her desk, a hand resting on a vacant chair, his brow furrowed, concern etched around his eyes. She hadn't seen him approach. "You look unwell." His gaze lingered on the dark circles beneath her eyes, the tremor in her hand as she gathered scattered papers. "This orphanage research. It's consuming you. You haven't looked well for weeks. Perhaps a break. Or well, there are excellent resources on campus for stress, burnout." He offered a pamphlet, its glossy surface, mocking her unraveling. Clara stared at the pamphlet, then at her own trembling fingers. Stress. Burnout. How could she explain the spectral melody, the chilling visions, the certainty that forgotten children were clawing into her consciousness, demanding justice? Her problem wasn't stress. Her problem was a ghost, or many, and a monster long buried. A therapist wouldn't understand. They would talk of delusions, of fatigue, of a mind pushed too far. They would try to silence the voices she was finally learning to hear, but the alternative, The constant drone in her head, the images that made the library spin, the way her own name sounded foreign on Albright's tongue. She couldn't continue. The research was stalled, her body failing. The thought of relief, even from a source she distrusted, was a desperate, aching lure. The phantom children demanded justice, but Clara, broken and exhausted, just wanted silence. She didn't believe in their cures, not for this, but the promise of even a moment's peace was enough. It had to be. Chapter 5. The Midpoint. A crack in the wall. The air in Dr. Eleanor Vance's office felt thick, alien. Clara perched on the armchair's edge, spine rigid, hands clasped in her lap. The therapist, kind-eyed and quiet, sat opposite, a notepad untouched on her knee. Warm light and lavender scented the room, a stark contrast to St. Augustine's damp chill, or the relentless, cold melody in Clara's mind. Clara's voice was clipped, professional as she began. "Professor Albright suggested I see you." She focused on the framed lake scene behind Dr. Vance. "He believes I'm burnt out from research." Dr. Vance offered a small, encouraging smile. "And what do you believe, Clara?" Clara bristled. "I believe I contact children who died horrifically. Their suffering was silenced. Their spectral presences now plead for justice." She launched into an academic account. St. Augustine's, missing records, Croft's unnerving eulogies, music box references. She described the melody's chilling onset, the institutional smells, Sarah's visions. She presented it all as forensic evidence, incontrovertible proof of external haunting. Dr. Vance listened, gaze unwavering, not interrupting. When Clara paused, breathless, profound silence settled. "That sounds like a profound, disorienting experience, Clara," Dr. Vance said, her voice soft, unjudging. "To believe you carry the burden of these children's untold stories." Clara nodded, vindication flickering in her eyes. "Precisely. And Professor Albright insists it's simply stress." She uttered the word as absurd, insufficient. "And what does that feel like, Clara?" Dr. Vance asked, leaning forward. "When you hear the melody? When you see Sarah? When you feel that cold, or smell those old familiar scents? Where do you feel it?" Clara's jaw tightened. She shifted, discomforted. "I feel compelled, driven. I feel the injustice. I feel their fear, their sadness." She waved a dismissive hand. "It's not about me." "You're experiencing a great deal, Clara," Dr. Vance observed, "and your body and mind respond to that. What if we simply explore those responses for now? How they manifest for you?" Clara stared. Dissecting her own feelings apart from empirical facts felt a betrayal of her mission. She was a vessel for the forgotten, not the subject of examination. "It would be a distraction," she declared, her voice firm. "My focus must remain on St. Augustine's. On Croft. Perhaps understanding your reactions to St. Augustine's will only make you a stronger advocate," Dr. Vance countered, unwavering. "It takes immense strength to bear witness, Clara, and it takes courage to look inward." The words hung in the air. Clara didn't respond, but the unwelcome seed had been planted. Back in her apartment, session tension gave way to renewed, frantic energy. Dr. Vance's words, intended to calm, had instead sharpened her focus on Croft. If the music box was so central to the Fardag ghosts, then it must be central to him. Days blurred into nights. Clara's apartment became a warren of papers, books, faint, insistent music. She scoured neglected local newspapers, old community newsletters, obscure 1950s classifieds. She traced Croft's movements before St. Augustine's, a brief stint at a smaller upstate children's home, since demolished. There, buried in a tiny, almost illegible article about a local carpentry club, she found it. A throwaway line praised Jasper Croft, a man of many talents, even crafting intricate music boxes for the children at the old Elmwood home. Icy dread bolted through her, Elmwood Home. Not St. Augustine's but another institution. And Croft, crafting her torment's very instrument. The melody in her head, usually a phantom hum, swelled, a tangible pressure behind her eyes. It was no longer just a music box, but Croft's music box. His hands had touched it. His name was tied to its specific, childish lilt. The next therapy session felt different. Clara arrived, a folder clutched to her chest, the newspaper clipping folded within. She laid it on Dr. Vance's desk, a silent challenge. "He made them," Clara whispered. "The music boxes. He crafted them." She didn't need to explain who he was. Dr. Vance picked up the clipping, scanned it. "And that feels significant to you?" "Significant?" Clara laughed, brittle, humorless. "It's damning. It's proof of his depravity. The melody, it's his signature." The music in her head, invigorated by discovery, pulsed. It wasn't a gentle lullaby anymore, it was a dirge, insistent, suffocating. Dr. Vance's voice drifted in and out. "Clara." The room blurred. Lavender vanished, replaced by a metallic tang, old blood and disinfectant. The melody sharpened, deafening. She was no longer in the office. She was small, impossibly small. Her knees were drawn to her chest. Darkness pressed in, absolute and cold. The rough weave of institutional wool against her cheek. A faint draft under a heavy wooden door. And then, it began. Not in her head, but from somewhere outside the door. The tinny, relentless plinking of that music box. The childish tune, playing over and over. She tried to shrink, to disappear into the rough wool, to stop the sound. Tears streamed, silent, hot on her face. Her breath hitched, caught in her throat, a desperate, childish whimper. Profound, physical fear wrapped around her, squeezed air from her lungs. She was alone. Trapped. The melody, a cruel companion in the inky black. A hand, warm and firm, on her arm. Clara. Darkness receded, slowly, painfully. Metallic tang dissipated. Lavender returned. Dr. Vance's face swam into focus, eyes wide with concern. Clara trembled violently, chest heaving as if she'd run a marathon. Her throat was raw. "The music box!" Clara gasped, words tearing from her, ragged, broken. "It was in the dark. I was there." Her eyes darted around the room, settling on Dr. Vance, then on the framed lake print. The child in the dark, listening to the insidious melody, had not been Sarah. It had not been a ghost. A crack formed in her meticulously built wall of logic. The ghosts were no longer mere external echoes of the past. They were, in that terrifying moment, unmistakably, profoundly personal. Dr. Vance's persistent question, "What do these feelings remind you of, Clara?" beyond the orphanage quote, had finally cleaved through. The realization shattered her, yes, but left in its wake a chilling, unshakable certainty. The terror wasn't just nameless, it was a memory she had meticulously buried, and now, she had to dig it up. Chapter 6. Croft's Lair and Her Own Prison. A metallic tang of resolve, not the usual dust of research, filled Clara's apartment. Her hands packed a small bag, flashlight, gloves, a compact camera, with brutal efficiency. No anxiolytics this time. No frantic notes on spectral communication. Dr. Vance's words, a chisel, fissured Clara's logical facade. "What do these feelings remind you of, Clara, beyond the orphanage?" The music box, the darkness, the child glimpsed in therapy. She was that child. The fear now was not of unseen entities, but of a truth she had buried alive. She slipped a marked map into her pocket. Croft's section of the orphanage, a hunch born of fragmented memories and his chilling habits. This was no ghost hunt. This was an excavation. St. Augustine's offered its skeletal embrace of broken glass and peeling paint. Clara saw no haunted ruin. She saw a crime scene. Her deliberate steps echoed through corridors that once felt profoundly abandoned. Now she traced forgotten architecture, picturing Croft's patrols, his routine, the archive notes on his private moments of reflection, his almost compulsive need for order, for control. She bypassed the children's dormitories, the kitchen, the assembly hall. Her instinct drew her to a seldom-mentioned annex, tucked away, the old staff quarters. A single heavy door, unlike the others, stood slightly ajar. It led into a narrower passage. The air here was thicker. A stale, sickly sweet odor she couldn't place, but knew in her gut. The passage dead-ended at another door, unmarked, blending seamlessly with the wall. Clara ran gloved fingers over rough plaster. Her sharp eyes caught a subtle seam in the paint, a hairline fracture in the masonry. A hidden rusted latch protested, giving way. It swung inward, revealing a small, windowless room. The smell solidified: decay, disinfectant, and something else. Iron, maybe. Inside, a single bare bulb hung by a fraying wire, its dusty glow revealing a space meticulously maintained amidst the surrounding ruin. A small, sturdy desk dominated the room, its surface clear. But above it, the wall held a grid of locked cabinets. A narrow floor-to-ceiling shelf displayed identical, leather-bound ledgers. Clara's gaze locked onto the desk. A small, ornate, dark wooden box sat centered. The music box. Her breath hitched. A cold tremor seized her. Despite the tremor, her hands reached for the ledgers. One, then another. St. Augustine's Orphanage, Daily Report, 1952. Her fingers flipped through the crisp yellowed pages. Dates. Names. Disciplinary actions. Each entry a chilling detached account of a child's punishment. Signed by Jasper Croft's elegant, looping script. Not merely logs, but detailed records of suffering. A separate section. Therapeutic measures. Her stomach churned. A small carved wooden bird, chipped and worn, lay half hidden behind a stack of papers. She recognized it from a missing child's record, a gift from a distant aunt. A single, faded ribbon, braided with a name she now knew. Sarah. Croft had kept them. Trophies. Her eyes snapped back to the music box. A raw, visceral dread settled deep in her bones. Her trembling fingers grazed the cold, smooth wood. The melody, once an echoing whisper, now burst forth, sharp and clear within her mind. Not a phantom, but a memory, solidifying. The dark room. No windows. A tiny cot. She, a child, curled into a ball, small hands pressed over her ears, blocking out the relentless, innocent tune. She remembered the scratch of the rough woolen blanket, the institutional smell of bleach and fear, familiar from this orphanage, but belonging to another, earlier prison. Elmwood. The door, thick and unforgiving, was locked. The silence outside was heavier than the melody. She had been so small, so powerless. The ache in her chest was not Sarah's, or the other children's. It was hers. The fear, the abandonment, the gnawing certainty that no one would come. That music box. The sound. A lullaby of her terror. A companion to her confinement. She saw herself, weeping, pounding small fists on the heavy wood of the door, calling for a mother who never answered. She saw Jasper Croft's face as the jailer, the architect of her terror, not the benevolent caretaker, mirrored by the stern, unfeeling faces of Elmwood staff. The faces blurred, became one. The ghosts of St. Augustine's faded, dissipated, irrelevant. They were her silence, manifest. Clara sank to the floor, surrounded by Croft's damning evidence, her past brutally excavated. The cold stone pressed against her cheek, but she felt nothing but the searing heat of retrieved memories. The orphanage, Croft's lair, was no mere monument to forgotten suffering. It was a mirror, reflecting her own childhood prison, its walls built of silence, and a ceaseless, mocking music box jingle. The true haunting, she finally understood, had never been outside her, but deeply, terrifyingly, within. She had to speak. Chapter 7. The Truth Unveiled. The sterile antiseptic scent of Dr. Vance's office now mirrored the stale disinfectant of St. Augustine's, the bitter sting of Elmwood. Clara sat rigid, knuckles white where her hands clasped. Revelations from Croft's hidden lair, the violent surge of her past, had cracked her open, exposing bleeding memories. "It wasn't them," she whispered, her voice reedy, barely audible above the air conditioning's hum. "The children. The ghosts. It was me." Dr. Vance leaned forward, her unwavering expression a quiet anchor in Clara's storm. "Tell me about me, Clara." Clara swallowed past the dry effort of speech. The music box. The cold. Trapped. Small. Sarah. She wasn't. She was a reflection. A memory projected onto their suffering. Inaccessible to me. It was all a language I didn't know I spoke. Her gaze darted around the room, as if the words might materialize, terrifyingly real. "He was there, Dr. Vance. Jasper Croft. He wasn't just St. Augustine's caretaker. He was part of my childhood prison." The last sentence ripped from her, ragged, raw. A tremor ran through her, her body recalling fear before her mind articulated it. Dr. Vance nodded, a silent invitation. The weeks that followed blurred into a landscape of grief and rage. Some sessions, Clara barely spoke, staring out the window. Tears silently tracked her cheeks. She grieved for the spectral children of St. Augustine's, their broken horse, their stolen lives. She also grieved for a small girl, locked in a dark room, humming discordant tunes to ward off encroaching blackness. Her lost childhood throbbed like a phantom limb. Other times, quiet contemplation erupted into cold, furious heat. "How could they?" she spat, slamming a fist on her thigh. "The community, the authorities, the system, my parents, to discard us. Lock us away, call it care, and let monsters like Croft operate in plain sight." Her voice trembled. He documented it all. Every transgression, every punishment. He kept their hair ribbons, their tiny broken toys, like trophies. A monument to his power. Dr. Vance listened, allowing the torrent of emotion to wash over them. "The rage is healthy, Clara," she said after one such outburst. "It's a sign you're reclaiming what was taken. That you're no longer powerless." Slowly, painfully, Clara began to piece together the shattered fragments. Dr. Vance helped her navigate the treacherous terrain, illuminating the psychological mechanisms. "Your mind protected you, burying the memory," Dr. Vance explained, sketching on a notepad. "But trauma doesn't disappear, it finds other ways to manifest. The ghosts of St. Augustine's, the music box, they weren't literal, but no less real as symptoms. They were your internal alarm, ringing louder, forcing you to look at a truth too terrible to remember directly." Clara nodded, a fragile understanding taking root. The music box. Once a harbinger of dread, then a key to Croft's atrocities, it finally echoed her own terror. It no longer haunted her. It was a scar, a reminder of survival. Sarah, the child of St. Augustine's, who pulled her through the crumbling orphanage, was no longer just a victim. She was a silent ally, her pain resonating with Clara's, a collective cry for justice Clara now understood. One afternoon, across from Dr. Vance, the setting sun painting the room orange and gold, a stillness settled over Clara. The knot in her chest, a constant companion for months, eased. She closed her eyes, picturing the ledger, Croft's meticulous handwriting detailing abuse, then her small face, reflected in the dark window of a forgotten room. When she opened her eyes, a new resolve burned. "I'm a historian," she said, her voice clear, strong, devoid of its former tremor. "My life's work uncovers forgotten truths. And I am a survivor. I know this horror, not just from records but from inside. She looked directly at Dr. Vance, a spark ignited in her eyes. Those children at St. Augustine's and others like them, including myself, we were silenced. Erased. But I'm not silent anymore. I know their stories and mine. It's time the world knew too. A profound sense of purpose, stark, unyielding, settled over her. The years of academic detachment vanished, replaced by an urgent personal mission that pulsed with every beat of her heart. Her research, once a quiet pursuit of forgotten facts, would now become a relentless excavation. The silence was broken, the work had begun, and she knew it would be a raw. Chapter 8. A new kind of advocacy. Months spun into a new season, shedding the past's oppressive weight. Clara sat at her desk, her laptop's familiar hum countering the click of her fingers on the keyboard. Stacks of historical documents, annotated with cross-references, shared space with printed transcripts of her therapy sessions, raw recollections of her Elmwood childhood. Facts no longer felt separate from feelings. St. Augustine's archives, Jasper Croft's meticulous ledgers, Sarah's fragmented memories, and her own visceral terror coalesced into a single, harrowing narrative. She typed with steady rhythm, each sentence a brick in a formidable wall of truth. Her prose, once intellectually detached, now pulsed with quiet, furious energy. She wove Croft's damning cruelty with systemic failures that enabled his reign, detailing the indifference veiling horror. And, with a deep cleansing breath, she interwove her story, not as a separate account, but as a living testament to institutional violence's insidious echoes. She wrote of the music box, not as metaphor, but as a real, terrifying instrument of her confinement, and the children's demise. The lines between historian and survivor blurred, then vanished. The article, released in a prestigious academic journal then quickly syndicated by major news outlets, struck the public like a physical blow. Headlines screamed. Old wounds, long festering in forgotten towns, tore open. Inquests launched. St. Augustine's, once a whispered rumor, became a national shame. Community leaders, shamed by their predecessors' blindness, apologized for their silence. For St. Augustine's children, those forgotten names, profound, wrenching public grief erupted, a recognition long overdue. Their faces, recreated by artists from faded school photographs, were finally seen. Clara sat in the stark, bright glare of a television studio. The interviewer, a seasoned journalist, leaned forward, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Dr. Sutton," she began, "your work has brought to light unspeakable horrors, and your personal story. It's quite extraordinary. How did you find the courage to share it?" Clara met her gaze, quiet confidence in her posture. She no longer guarded herself with an academic shield. The children of St. Augustine's and the others deserved a voice. My story, for all its pain, unlocked theirs. It wasn't courage, not initially. It was compulsion. But now. She paused, her voice quivering then steadying. Now it is a duty. She spoke of unchecked power's insidious nature. How institutions became prisons, and how benevolence's mask often concealed monstrous acts. Her words, precise and unburdened by self-pity, infused with resolute passion. The interview ended, not with an exhausted sigh, but with quiet, purposeful stillness. Weeks later, at a national child protection conference, Clara stood before an auditorium packed with educators, social workers, and policymakers. The air thrummed with expectation. She spoke without notes, her voice clear and resonant, filling the cavernous space. "We cannot allow history to repeat itself in silence," she declared, her eyes scanning the audience. "We must dismantle structures enabling abuse, hold institutions accountable, and, most importantly, empower the vulnerable." My journey began as a pursuit of historical truth, evolved into a confrontation with personal demons, and has now become a commitment. Ensuring no child's cries are dismissed as bad dreams, or their stories left buried. She detailed proposals for stricter oversight, mandatory reporting, and comprehensive historical audits of institutional care. Her words were not just an exposé, but a blueprint for change. The standing ovation felt like a wave of affirmation, a collective sigh of hope. Clara didn't bask, she simply nodded, focused intensity in her eyes. The work, she knew, was just beginning. Later, in her living room's quiet solitude, Clara sat by the window, evening light painting the walls gold and rose. In her hands, she held the small wooden music box, its intricate carvings worn smooth by time and terror. For so long its image evoked primal fear, its melody a haunting, insistent echo of confinement and pain. She wound the mechanism, the familiar, delicate tune tinkled softly in the silence. It was the same melody, yes, but no longer conjured darkness. It was a ghost, finally laid to rest. It was the sound of a child's sorrow, acknowledged. It was the faint, lingering echo of a truth unearthed. And it was, unexpectedly, a melody of resilience, a reminder of the path she walked, the demons she faced, and the voice she found. A voice that would now speak for all those who could not. Her scars remained, etched deep, but no longer defined her. They guided her. Her mission had become her peace.
Thank you for listening to this Soundscape Books recording. We hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe so you don't miss our new releases. Goodbye for now.